This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to the Digital Dish,
a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. I'm Lois.
I'm Missy.
And I'm Jeanne. And we want to make sure smart women and their points of view were being heard. All right, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of ISG Digital Dish. We go through an introduction and an interview of Missy Lawrence-Johnston. She's our new co-host. But I really wanted to say a few words before you get into the interview because Missy just talks about her and she's just amazing. So she really has a scientific approach to adaptive organizations and how we change and what people and culture is about. It's a really fun conversation. It also introduces Missy, who is really going to bring a different voice and perspective to our podcast. So we're very, very excited about that. But I do want to also add that you should go find Chihuahua or muffin meme, and then you'll have a better idea of what we're talking about 5 or 6 minutes in. So that's that. Those are my notes. Enjoy the interview.
Hey, everybody. This is Lois, and we're pretty excited today because Jeanne and I get to interview our new co-host. Woohoo!
Yay!
We've got Missy Lawrence-Johnston with us today. And you've actually heard Missy already on a prior episode. She was part of our panel. But we thought, before we dive into all, our next season or our next year, we actually take a time to introduce Missy to everyone. And, she's part of our firm, ISG, and she is a capability leader in our operating model practice, which is kind of near and dear to my heart because I used to do that, in a past life. And I think this is a great way or a great time to say, what does that mean? I don't know. What does operating model mean?
What does that mean, Missy?
It's important that we are doing in that area.
For sure.
Missy, do you want to kind of give us a flavor of what you do?
For sure. Thank you for that. I'm really stoked to be here amongst my fellow geek squad. I like to nerd out about things. But so a day in my life right now with ISG is really about helping enterprise clients, providers, no matter where you are within enterprise IT, and even some providers who are supporting non-IT enterprises, really just better understand. I like to simplify it to just the way we do things around here. It's your people, your process, and your tech. Whatever you're doing is either adding value or it's not. And are you getting the most out of that value? And of course, we have a framework for best in class, modern agility, what's working, what's not working, depending on how the market and industries have changed and shifted. So I won't bore everyone with all of those details of how we break out people, process, and technology. But essentially, that's what it is. In its simplest way is, how do you do things and is it working for you?
So, Missy, I think when we want to pull this back into like the digital aspect of it. So what's the latest? I think that's what I'm really interested in because I'm like geeking out about how digital affects a client or a company. So talk to me about what your focus would be and what you're passionate, what we joked about, what you're passionate about because I'm passionate about the technology. So what are you passionate about in terms of working with clients?
Yes, I am passionate about the people in technology, the people who are developing technology, not just the people who are receiving it, but how do you ensure that you are optimizing the human capital who is creating AI, right? Who's out here trying to reverse hack our systems. There's so much pressure on the people who are actually the pioneers of innovation and driving real systematic change and just evolution in how all businesses run. It's a lot of pressure for them right now. I've always been very passionate about people who drive and push change, whether it's in my federal government career in the Department of Labor in the Employment and Training Administration, where I worked in the Office of Foreign Labor Certification, because we couldn't get enough people in technology 20 years ago, right? So we had to look outside of our country to just get more capabilities for people in technology. So then how do we actually grow and develop this next generation of people in technology from a workforce perspective? And then when I came over into private sector, I've worked with many of the Fortune 100 companies supporting a chief product and technology officer or a CIO from an HR perspective as an HR business partner. So it's still always the people and the people in tech and the people in digital, whether it's a tech company that builds applications for hotels or the airline industry, or it's the enterprise IT within a company, right? That's not their main customers or line of business, but no one doesn't have IT, right? And then no one doesn't have people in IT. So we have to have a focus on the people who are really ushering in the new. So that's my passion. And when I tell you about being geeked, it's really scientific how I understand people down to the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and all the neuroscience behind.
Whoa.
Behavior management, right? It's behavior management. And it's a leadership skill set that's historically been reserved only for highest executives or performance coaches with, big money. Many people have heard of the show Billions. There's a character on this show called Wendy. And I like to be the Wendy of technology.
You're Wendy. I know what you're talking about. Oh my God.
I love Wendy.
Yeah.
I'm not as sociopathic, but I think I also like to.
Hey, with that, what I read your article. You wrote an article of "I Am Not a Cat," and I think that is just it's such a funny article. But it's about AI and facial recognition and some of the other things. So, and everybody just needs to go find it. You're just gonna have to go find it by. I Am Not a Cat by Missy Lawrence-Johnston, but it's hilarious, and she keeps getting recognized as a cat by her phone, right? Isn't it your phone? And so
yes, not me in particular, but there was a study out. My favorite one though is the Chihuahua versus the muffin,
right?
And it's like a blueberry muffin. I'll send you a picture, or just Google it. Everyone Google it right now.
Right?
They couldn't tell.
Right?
You weren't testing enough. No one's testing Chihuahuas, but that's the whole point, right? Is that you have to have the right, or muffins, diversity in there. And when you had a bunch of white men in a room doing tests, right? And if they're the developers and they're creating, then that's going to change algorithms in the data, right? So that's a whole another talk track, but that's just one. That's a perfect example of really understanding the people and the people who build tech and making sure that those people understand people. And that leaders understand how to lead those people. So it's a 360 view that I live it and breathe it. And that's how I spend my weekends and nights. And it's fun for me. It truly is passion, I think, of suffering, but it's more of an absorbing, meaningful path that I love. And then your other question was, what's current, right? Or what's the future?
What's current? What's going on now? What's going on? You got a t-shirt that says culture. So I'm like, I saw it earlier. So I'm like,
culture always wins.
Okay. All right. I think that's what's going on, right?
What's going on is, well, let's say what's going on the past 10 years leading up to the pandemic was organizations needed to be more flexible. They needed to deliver technology at various speeds, right? And that's what most people had come to call Agile or agility.
Right.
And that was not just in the software development lifecycle, right? It's about how you work with the business so that the enterprise also is becoming more agile with you. And then the providers, how do they fit into that level of agility and flexibility and actually offer you the options to be more flexible and a bit more agile? We always knew from the time of the Agile Manifesto that there are cultural principles there.
Right.
And that you should value certain things like people over process. That's one of the basic for the 4 tenets. But we never really knew what that meant. And some people started to use that as to say, we don't need to document this process. Who needs a business requirements document anymore? Get rid of the BRDs. We're doing sprint planning with Post-its.
Or you get the IT people, screw it, anybody can do it. It's all about the process. Yes. So yeah, you've got to balance. Yeah.
And the intent is supposed to be, Well, we get people, we understand people, we're developing for people, we're trying to deliver code in 2-week chunks, so we're trying to push value to people. Now, that requires a level of design thinking. So then you start seeing UX, UI. That requires a whole lot of empathy and empathy mapping. That's a part of that. And that was almost a subset, right? A function. They'll do that. UX research will do that. Not that internally we need to understand empathy or have more empathetic leaders. And so what's happened is this shift towards your value proposition and your brand. And I always use this culture as a coin, like a quarter or something. So on one side is your net promoter score at a quarter.
She's got a quarter in her hand. She's so ready for this.
That's funny. It's like, who has coins? Where do I even get that?
Yeah, I don't even know.
We don't even use cash anymore. So the one side of the quarter is your net promoter score, external brand, right? The other side is your culture internally. And we said your operating model is just the way you do things.
Right.
Your culture is how you define that way you do things, right? And the value of this can only be as strong as both sides. Like, you can't have a weak internal culture and a strong external brand, or not for long. We've seen some recent names of big companies in the news, right? Or vice versa. The inside always gets out, no matter how much, and you have to adjust and evolve. So those companies who have either been born digital or have adjusted and made the shift naturally are going to have this ability to adapt and pivot quickly. So when COVID hits, boom, people who are rigid, companies who are rigid, leaders who are rigid, they are now out of control. They cannot control these things. Now, what do? You have to have people who know how to react. And the future, and what companies who are leading, because they were already ready, they are intuitive. There's intuitive digital leaders who use insights and they use predictions and they can foresee what's coming using data and navigate in a different way. And they're more fluid. Whereas a lot of companies right now, they were just trying to survive, right? 2020, 2021. Now those operating models that they had to make quick, decisions for and make changes, or very specific changes, they now need to adapt. Okay, this might be no one wants to hear this ever again, new normal.
Yeah, we don't want to hear that anymore. This is just the way we're doing things.
But this is now the new way we're doing things. Like, we're not going to go back. There's none of and that's hard for people because our brains have to make predictions. We have to be able to connect. That happened and this happens. And when this happens again, this is what you're going to do. So gone are the days of change fatigue. If you don't know how to evolve, it's not a one-time change. Right? Oh, we have so much change going on. There's too much. That's the new skill set of the future, is that you can navigate and adapt.
So I got a question for you. Maybe this is flipping it a little bit, because you've been talking about what an enterprise needs to do to, operate more effectively, to have a great way of doing work. Now, if you flip that to the individual, and if an individual is looking for the right company or the right environment where they can be successful and feel like, they can really jump in and be a part of that team, what should they be looking for? What's the flip side of that?
Lois, that's what we're seeing with the Great Resignation, is now that people have been home, not working from home. Now they're just kind of homing from work. The individual has realized what they truly need, what they truly want, probably in their personal life and in their professional life. We talked a little bit about this with the Great Resignation, right, with Julie. Yeah. And I think now we are being interviewed as companies.
Yeah.
And internally, people are interviewing their company again. They're allowed, reintroduce myself to you, and companies are having to reintroduce themselves to their existing talent to say, let's create a new social contract with our employees, and employees are going to decide, yeah, this doesn't work for me anymore, or this new thing does work for me, or this new thing won't work for me, and let me look elsewhere. And I think people have now started naturally having an ability to ask questions, and things that maybe were not particular, we're seeing them all the time. If you go out to Glassdoor or anywhere you're looking for full stack developers, the companies are putting the cultural things out there, and people are starting to know and get more savvy with their questions and who they will even entertain or respond, to. So I think the individual is already making the decision, whether they know it or not, to find that cultural fit.
And that's, I think, is what's really cool, because as you were talking about your two sides of your quarter, I love that analogy because, I think there's such an, thinking that let's have this brand, right? We're exuding this brand as a firm. But really, what's now so important is that culture, because not only does it come through, but that's how you're going to win talent. That's how you're going to really bridge all the people inside that company and really, gel that to do what you're seeking out to do as a firm. And I just, I think the importance of that is just incredible for every company now to really recognize and understand what their culture is.
Yes.
And people are hearing about it too. People know if, and as you said, Missy, that they know if somebody's not is saying one thing but doing something else. People are getting pretty savvy about that, and there's a lot of tools to figure that out. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the world is flatter. The more digital the world is, the flatter the world becomes, right? Your communities, I don't know what I was looking at, is like the number 5 community in the world. Like China's number 1, Facebook's number 2. Right? It's not a location. It's not a building. It's not a culture. It's like these are the communities of the future. So all I had to do is go on LinkedIn or go on Facebook and see who works where, get some real-time feedback, and people are happy to talk, right? This next generation is the knowledge workers, right? The knowledge generation, and they were born with search engines. And so it's nothing that you can really kind of put on. That transparency is there. So I think there's a big push we're seeing with the enterprises and on the provider side to lead with their culture first, or lead with their aspirational tenants first. I just want to say there's no wrong culture. There's no right culture, And then when it comes to the operating model, that's one component under people, where there's several other things like, what are the skills of the people?
Right.
How are you developing, and how are they learning? Are they free to experiment and do innovation? All those things that we assess around people.
So I have a question, because I think we talked about this. You had an earlier thing where we talk about the misalignment between business and IT.
Yes.
And I feel like this kind of feeds into it. Like, because I know I've got my master's in IT management. So and I know was a whole big debate a few years ago about, is IT just a commodity? But what we're finding, it's more and more involved with everything in the day-to-day business. So how do we bridge that? How do we work to bridge that gap? That's what I'm kind of thinking through. I think that's an ongoing question, but what's your thoughts on that piece?
It is, and there are modes of operating that have a structured methodology and an approach that you can take to gain that alignment. Whether you call it business IT aligned, productization, prototyping within some sort of a center of excellence or an innovation hub. We're seeing the rise of the chief digital officer that doesn't necessarily sit within the CIO or the chief technology officer space, right? So I think a few years ago, that question would have still been us versus them. Yeah. Business wants this, and IT is either not giving us what we want, or they're moving too slow, and I'm just going to go find another island IT, hire someone else to do that piece, and then do we need them for backup? Like whatever that may be.
And I think that will also help build the diversity that is needed now in IT. It's like you have to align it with the business, and you have to make sure that this is appealing to people from all different walks of life. And I feel like that's been kind of shut out.
Well, and I think also it's not so much, I think there's so many people who are now digital right? You don't have to have an IT degree or you can
Right.
be in HR and you are digital, and you can
Yes.
be in finance or in marketing, or, and so I think that what is great for the trajectory that I'm excited about exploring these topics in more of our episodes is, it's really becoming exciting for any walk of, career path or any area that, individuals can really explore. What are the cultures they want to work in? What are the organizational constructs to help, weave that and drive that and figure out what's going to be most important within their organization, whether you're sitting in IT or in the business.
Right.
It's just an exciting world out there and change that's going on.
It really is. It really is. Like, gone are the days of just like hierarchies. People are probably more familiar with like the Zappos operating model, where they have a holacracy, where you are grading your thing, and it doesn't matter if you are the C-suite. There's no there's C-suite, right? You got to report to a board, and you have certain goals and metrics that they're responsible for. But if you're not in that circle, you have no say. You don't go up the system for approvals.
Right.
This people in this group who works this for that customer is delivering value directly. And you're going to see a lot more variation from moving from a hierarchy to a meritocracy to maybe something that's more of a blended or a hybrid. You don't want anarchy, right? All the way on the end, you can't have nothing. So you have to address culture so that just the squeakiest wheel or the more, I want to say, dominant people create the culture. You have to cultivate the culture. And that is the leader's new imperative right now. It's what is the culture and how are we going to manage behaviors? That's the hardest part. We can think through the processes and the technology, but what's going to completely disable your transformation to digital, your ability to adapt, is the focus on the people who've not had to adapt.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up, because this sort of sets the tone for some of the things we'll be talking about this year. I think the empowering, educating, transformation, I think these are all really great themes that I can't wait to see who Missy brings in, because she brings in a whole different environment and a whole different approach to it. So I'm very excited about having you on the team. That you get to interview more. Everybody gets to hear Missy instead of me. So I'm very excited about that.
Likewise, it's going to be a great year, and we need to get our first guest soon. Our next episode, hopefully coming soon. So then we can really dive into some of these topics.
Thanks for listening. If you like our podcast, please subscribe and rate and review us. Thank you.